And we'll remove the banner. And we'll remove the starting soon. Because we're starting now. Hello, everybody. This is Dylan Moore and Nima Major of Irida TV. We're doing some live streaming. I am sick. You can probably hear it, but I'm here today anyway. So, Nima, I'm going to send some Kufid through this microphone at you so you can get sick too all the way on the other side of the country. End all freedom now.
So I'm getting like 2 feeds right now. I'm confused.
You're getting 2 feeds?
Sorry, because I had Odyssey on.
Oh, there you go.
So
Colonel
it's
Foley
confusing.
says hi. Hello, Colonel Foley.
Hi there. Yeah.
So, now that Nima no longer has 2 feeds, and I need to get Nima's company on here, which is Irida TV. So that shows up. Boom. There we go. So we're going to be talking today about how China is about to call its U.S. debt due, and everything's going to be over. Everything's going to be
So,
over because China completely owns everything that the United States has. The United States is totally weak. BRICS is going to steamroll the U.S. dollar. The petrodollar is going to come to a crash, and everything's going to come home and hyperinflate, and then there's going to be civil war, and everything's over. Did I get that in the right order, Nima?
yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
So no, that's all a bunch of crap. All of it's a bunch of crap, okay? And specifically, at least we're going to start with this wonderful tweet that we found by somebody talking about the supposed debt that China holds over the United States, and we felt that it was a perfect opportunity to show the absolute economic illiteracy running rampant throughout everywhere. And so let's break it down, good old MMT fashion, so you can go home with something a little bit more coherent and stop worrying that China is going to do a damn thing. At least economically speaking, they are importing a bunch of fentanyl, right? That China's going to do a damn thing with its supposed debt that it holds over the heads of the United States. So let's jump into this tweet. I don't even know who this person is, but Nima found it, and it's just perfect for what we're talking about here. So this is by from Arnaud. Arnaud, is that like Arnold with a speech impediment? Arnaud Bertrand. The story around China issuing U.S. dollar-denominated sovereign bonds in Saudi Arabia is generating an enormous amount of buzz in China and could potentially be immensely important. So first off, Nima, do you know anything about these U.S. dollar-denominated bonds that China is issuing in Saudi Arabia?
Just what he's saying here, honestly.
Okay, so let's just take for granted that what he's saying here is true, right?
Mhm.
I'll maximize this again. And I strongly suspect it's a message to the upcoming Trump administration. Oh, do you hear that, Nima? China is now threatening Trump by issuing dollar-denominated
Right,
bonds.
right.
Right.
Let me close the door.
I don't want to do this. Yeah, so you can still see our pretty faces in the corner. There we go. So let me explain what's going on, this guy says. On the face of it, it's not a major story. China issued $2 billion in U.S. denominated sovereign bonds in Saudi Arabia, which means that investors lent United States dollars to the Chinese government that they promised to pay back. That's what a bond is. So far, relatively boring. And I agree. I'm about to fall asleep from this guy.
Actually, honestly, I would say I don't find that boring. I find that to be a very interesting aspect of this, because this means that China is actually borrowing foreign currency. So they're actually borrowing US dollars from, I don't know, for whoever buys these bonds, I guess Americans or
Apparently in Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, maybe some international sovereign wealth funds. I don't know. But this, I don't know if China has, when the last time was that China has had to borrow foreign currency. So maybe the amount isn't really all that significant. Maybe it's just a little experiment to see, maybe they'll scale it later. I don't know. But just to me, it was interesting to see that China is borrowing dollars. You're borrowing foreign currency, which is, as we talked about before, a lot of countries get in trouble when they borrow foreign currencies because they can't make them, and so currency fluctuations become a huge risk. Um, it could drive them to bankruptcy and hyperinflation and all those things. Not at these amounts, obviously, here with China, but the question is just why do they
Yeah,
need to issue? Why need to borrow
China
dollars?
supposedly has all these dollars. Why do they have to borrow $2 billion?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and then that also makes me wonder: is the Chinese government doing this, or is a Chinese company do it?
Good question. But it says that this guy claims China issued $2 billion
Okay, yeah, and he says
sovereign
Chinese
bonds,
government. So let's just run with it. Let's just say it's the
and it
Chinese
says,
government doing this.
yeah, it says
Yeah.
sovereign bonds, so those would be government bonds.
Okay. So I'll keep reading. The first somewhat interesting aspect of it is that the bonds were oversubscribed by almost 20 times, meaning $40 billion in demand for $2 billion worth of bonds, which is far more demand than the usual US dollar sovereign bonds. I'd guess full stop. He left out a very interesting part, which is what's the interest rate? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the promise to pay back? If the promise to pay back is 10, 15, 20%, obviously there's going to be a high demand for it because the bonds right now are what, 4%? Nima, 4.5% from the Federal Reserve. I mean, maybe it was a little higher before the rates dropped here. Let's say it was 5. But without that juicy piece of information, we're not really able to make heads or tails. I mean, maybe you can, of why that might be 20 times oversubscribed.
I mean, could just be that the amount they're offering is not very large to begin with, obviously. So it's a drop in the bucket compared to the global treasury market. Total treasury market is probably more like $30 trillion or so, 32 trillion or whatever at this point. So 2 billion, it doesn't really make a dent. But sorry, what was the question again? I'm
No,
rambling.
just why? Okay, let me. I'll get to ask the question again after I finish the paragraph. So he goes on to say, typically, U.S. Treasury auctions see oversubscription rate between 2 and 3 times. So there obviously seems to be a very strong market appeal for China's
Yeah,
dollar-denominated debt.
I mean, so the U.S. Treasury auction is a much larger market, is much more liquidity. So you're comparing like the amount of oversubscription on a gigantic pie to the oversubscription on a tiny breadcrumb, if you will. So that
And we
is
still don't know
probably,
the interest rate, right? I mean, the interest
yeah.
rate might tell
No,
us more of what's going on here.
it's such a weird construct,
Oh,
really.
no, he does get into the interest rate. Okay, wait a minute. He does. It's the next paragraph. Let's read that. So the second interesting aspect is that the interest rate on the bonds was remarkably close to the U.S. Treasury rates, just 1 to 3 basis points higher. That is to say, 0.01 to 0.03%, which means that China is now able to borrow money in U.S. dollars at virtually the same rate as the U.S. government itself. Okay, Nima. Here's where we run full onto the brick wall of economic illiteracy. The U.S. government can't borrow U.S. dollars. Dylan, what could you possibly mean? The U.S. government can't borrow U.S. dollars is because the U.S. government is the only entity on the face of the earth, or I would even say in the universe, that can print U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollars are a legal concept, a legal construct, printed by the U.S. government.
Mhm.
So when the U.S. government issues a bond, it's a completely different, what's the word I want, Nima? Process, thing, abstraction.
Mhm.
It's a completely different thing from a foreign entity or any other entity, me, Nima, China, a company, anything from issuing a bond because the government, the U.S. government, is unique in that it can issue U.S. dollars. It can issue bonds. Sorry, I got distracted by a comment here. China can't do that, right? So when they're saying, "Oh, China can command, borrow money at the same rate the U.S. government can," that it's not a matter of whether it has a similar pull. It's just two categorically different actions, totally fundamentally different actions.
Yeah, I mean, so it's the U.S. government, it creates the money, and then it's in the private sector, and then the U.S. government offers the private sector a savings a bond uh, to buy to for people to earn interest, but the U.S. government doesn't borrow dollars. You know, in the sense that somebody who needs the dollars and can't create them borrows U.S. dollars, such as the Chinese government in the above example.
Let me finish this paragraph. So that's the case for no other country in the world. I mean, okay. As a benchmark, countries with the highest credit ratings, AAA, typically pay at least 10 to 20 basis points over U.S. Treasuries in the rare instances when they issue U.S. dollar bonds. Again, I think it harkens back to what you said. $2 billion is like a drop in the bucket, if that. I mean, a drop in the bucket
Hmm.
of what the U.S. Treasury is typically cycling through. So let's see the point that he gets at here. The third interesting aspect is the venue itself for this bond sale, Saudi Arabia. This is unusual since sovereign bonds are typically issued in major financial centers, not Riyadh. The choice of Saudi Arabia and the fact that Saudis agreed to this is particularly significant given its historical role in the global dollar system, the so-called petrodollar system, which I don't need to explain. Well, we'll explain it. Okay, stopping halfway through this paragraph here. So again, I mean, before I address the petrodollar, there's a lot of details we would really need to know about this bond sale in Saudi Arabia to really infer anything further from it. And as Nima pointed out now multiple times, it's hard to really infer anything with such a tiny amount of money. Like when countries are interacting with money, 2 billion is pretty small. I mean, how much did Joe Biden promise Africa for aid recently? Was just another billion that he just, what was it, 1 billion, 10 billion? I don't even remember. How much money has gone to Ukraine right now? Billions. I mean, who cares about $2 billion, right? But the so-called petrodollar, so there's this vague, oh, it's in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has oil. This must have something to do with the petrodollar. I mean, this is just like non sequitur after non sequitur, like leapfrogging from one thing to another. But there's no such thing as the petrodollar. This idea that the dollar is valuable because people use it to trade oil is just false. The dollar is valuable, first and foremost, within the United States because it's demanded in taxes. In order to pay your taxes, you need to do it in U.S. dollars in the United States.
And your
That it's
debt,
value. Go ahead.
and your private debts as well.
Yes. Well, and then because it's now the unit by which we measure debt, we now use it to pay our private debts as well. Correct. And banking debts, same thing. The reason it's valuable, the dollar's
Bank
valuable.
debts, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. The reason that it's valuable outside of the United States, I mean, first and foremost, the United States has military hegemony over the whole planet, and
Well, it's also the largest, or
that was my second.
in measure, it's like the largest economy. I think in purchasing power parity, China is above the U.S. now, but I think in absolute amounts, the U.S. is still the largest world economy.
Right.
So it's significant. That's part of why the U.S. dollar is so important.
Yeah. The U.S. dollar gives you access to the U.S. economy.
Right.
Oh, we got a comment here. Werner would disagree with us on the petrodollar. Colonel Foley,
Yeah.
send us a link.
Yeah.
That'd be a fun follow-up video. But
I mean,
okay.
I think there is some kind of demand for extra U.S. dollars because it's transacted in oil, but it's not like it's necessary for there to be U.S. dollar demand. It might be both are a little bit true, but the petro is not so significant really to the value of the dollar as some people think.
Werner video on petrodollar. We'll look it up later. Thanks, Colonel Fully. So, um, on that, I mean, in terms of like, okay, this idea that let's say the petrodollar is true, the idea that something is going to replace it, it's just silly. I mean, I after the Ukraine war started, I remember hearing this piece of news that obviously Russia has turned to other players from getting sanctioned so much to get to sell its oil, China being one of them. And at one point, China paid Russia in yuan, and when Russia tried to turn around and buy something from China in that yuan, China didn't want it. So if you're going to have an international currency, probably the most important thing you have to do is accept the damn currency when someone wants to use it in your country, right?
For sure.
So, yeah, this idea that if everybody stops using dollars to pay for oil, that money is just going to like come home and cause hyperinflation. I mean, maybe the oil makes dollars a little more valuable, but the only way for that money to come home is if somebody buys something in the United States, right? I mean, if some prince in Saudi Arabia suddenly starts deciding to trade euros for his dollars, is he going to load them up on a ship and they'll like dump them in a port? Like all his United States dollars, he's going to load it up all in cash and just like dump it in a port in the United States, going, here, these are now worthless. I'm just going to get rid of them by sending them back to the United States. No. If in order for them to get back to the United States, he would have to buy something in the U.S. So,
which will boost exports.
Which would boost exports, which would improve the economy, right? So, going on, by issuing dollar bonds in Saudi Arabia that compete directly with U.S. treasuries, they don't compete directly with U.S. treasuries, and getting essentially the same interest rate, China is demonstrating it can operate as an alternative manager of dollar liquidity right at the heart of the petrodollar system. Now, I don't know why Saudi Arabia would be the heart of the petrodollar system, but last I checked, all this stuff, like when all these trades are happening, they're not sending boatloads of cash. There's adjustments being made in accounts at the Federal Reserve. And if the United States decided to say, you can't do that, then the purchase can't happen, right? So this idea that like there's this national security threat because China's moving money around, it's just silly. Like if the United States really felt, oh, hey, that's competing with our ability to sell bonds, not that they need to sell bonds and not that this actually competes in any way, shape, or form, but oh my God, somebody's doing that to compete with us. Why don't they could just be like, okay, we won't allow the transaction to go through.
I mean, also, so he's saying here China is demonstrating it can operate as an alternative manager of dollar liquidity. So, but why is the question? Why do you need to be a currency custodian for the U.S. dollars? Like, why are you inventing service, or why are you trying to compete in that service field as so many other organizations can do? It's like as if the US, imagine the US were to start borrowing Chinese yuan, and and issuing bonds for that, and building a whole bureaucracy around just dealing with yuan. Why? It's like, why do you care so much about the US dollar is the question, right? So it's like, because it's the most important currency in the world.
Reading on. Okay, that's all interesting, but still not the main reason why Chinese social media is abuzz. The reason...
Sorry, so you skipped the part up here. So right, so he's saying here, Arabia that competes with the treasuries and getting essentially the same interest rate. China is demonstrating it can operate as an alternative manager of dollar liquidity right in the heart of the petrodollar system. For Saudi Arabia, which holds hundreds of billions in dollar reserves. This creates a new option for investing their dollars. They can invest them with the Chinese government instead of the US government. Okay, but so
Right.
what? The US government doesn't care if you buy their bonds or not, honestly, really. It's
Well, and then China can default, the US
right.
government can't.
China's going
Right.
to possibly can get in trouble if they can't get the dollars. Let's say their export surpluses stop, and for a while they did, I guess, and now I think they've come back up. Um, but you're not really with the U.S. government. You run literally zero risks, and if you invest with the Chinese government at a little higher interest rate only, I don't really see the value in that proposition. But okay, I guess some people, maybe it's some kind of money laundering scheme. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess some
Yeah,
people
actually, that's a good point. I'm wondering if it's some Chinese scam that they're trying to figure out.
it's
Like,
like
"Oh, we gave you the bonds. You're in another country. You're in Saudi Arabia. Ha ha. We got your
it's
money.
like
Bye."
yeah,
Right.
it's a Temu bond market. Instead
Yeah.
of a real bond market, order a bond market on Temu, and you get this Chinese dollar
A
bond.
Chinese fake. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. So, okay, that's all interesting, but still not the main reason why Chinese social media is a buzz. The reason why is because they postulate that this is a trial round by China to demonstrate to the U.S. that they can effectively use their own currency against them with potentially dramatic consequences. Ooh, I want to hear what these potential dramatic consequences are, Nima. He says, how? First of all, think it through. Imagine if China scales this up and instead of issuing $2 billion worth of bonds, they start issuing tens or hundreds of billions worth. I guess it would still be a drop in the bucket compared to the trillions that the United States does. What this means for the US is that China could effectively be competing with the US Treasury in the global dollar market. Instead of countries like Saudi Arabia automatically recycling their dollars into the US Treasury, they could put them into the Chinese dollar bonds that pay the same rate. Again, I don't, who cares? Why does this matter? Right? Again, China can default. The
Right.
US can't.
So
Yeah.
the more they expose themselves to foreign debt that's in a currency that they need to obtain, they run the risk of hyperinflation, default, all the disasters that have happened in the past to countries like Hungary, Russia, who borrowed a lot foreign currency and then couldn't pay it back. Ukraine had hyperinflation, I believe, as well. Obviously, Zimbabwe was in that situation.
Venezuela. Yeah.
Venezuela, Germany was also in kind of in that situation because they had to borrow, they had to pay gold.
Gold.
They had paid giant
What
gold.
is it? Argentina in that situation right now?
Argentina,
Quasi, at least.
not yet. I think Malay mentioned that he wants to go on the dollar again, but they did that in the past, where yeah, they based all their whole system on dollars and fixed the currency, and yeah, I think they were in debt to U.S. banks. Um, so yeah, similar situation there.
I'll keep going. This would create a parallel dollar system. Sorry. I couldn't help but laugh on that one. Whew. This would create a parallel dollar system where China, not the US, controls part of the flow of dollars. The US would
And
still print
increasingly,
the dollars, but China would increasingly manage where they go. Imagine that. Again, the US literally has a switch where they could turn off the fucking transaction. What's that, Nima?
well, yeah. So I guess the China has a large control over U.S. dollars because of their export surpluses to begin with. So I don't know how much reserves they're sitting on at this point, but I think it's probably over, around 2 trillion, or maybe between a trillion and 2 trillion. I don't know. Um, and they can decide where to park those dollars, I guess. But so then, why does this now represent a completely novel ability for them to put dollars or to direct the flow of dollars?
And how's this different from any other country? Like, there's so many dollars on the international market that's flowing around and being redirected everywhere by
It's also
non-US players.
what you said. So now China is trying to get into the business of money lending by borrowing dollars, I guess, and then doing whatever with them. Invest, putting them back in the U.S. economy. I guess I don't know. Ultimately, that's where they have to. It's all very strange, and in my opinion, not. I don't see why it's necessary. I'm kind of curious to figure out what the intention or what the goal of this exercise is. I don't know if it's what this guy. I don't think it's what this guy here is saying. Um,
Yeah, I'm still suspicious it's not just some Chinese scam to
right,
steal $2
right.
billion.
Yeah.
Um, Andrew here in the comments reminds me to say, hyperinflate the like button, everybody.
Good point. Good point. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew
Yes.
is great. We love Andrew.
Another critical aspect is that every dollar that goes into Chinese bonds instead of U.S. treasuries is $1 less, helping to finance U.S. government spending. Bah!
Well, yeah. So okay. But it doesn't change the U.S. government budget. The Congress will pass budgets, and then they will run the deficits that they're going to run or not. So it doesn't really matter ultimately what these guys do. This is like these guys are building a shaky scam business or pyramid scheme business potentially, and over there the economy and the regular treasury market is going to keep doing what it's been doing.
Well, and to be clear, what Nima just emphasized, that the government doesn't borrow money to spend it. The government doesn't tax in order to spend it. The government, and this is any government that creates its own currency. So the same is with China and its own yuan. It creates the money first and taxes it later. And often, a country will say, "Hey, we'll give you an interest rate on your money, which is a bond that the country issues." But that taxation and that interest rate on the bond has nothing to do with the country's ability to deficit spend money into existence in the first place. Right? So China, on the
Especially
other
if their
hand,
resources are available. Yeah.
right? China, on the other hand, can't create dollars, so it does have to go through this game of we have to get the dollars somehow in order for us to spend them, but the U.S. doesn't. So the idea that China doing this, even if that number gets ramped up, doesn't affect the U.S. government in the slightest in its ability to afford its own budgets.
Right.
At a time when the U.S. is running massive deficits and needs to constantly sell treasury bonds to fund itself, we just corrected that idea. It does not. Having China emerge as a competing dollar bond issuer that can match treasury rates could pose immense financing problems for the U.S. government. Again, this is just this brick wall of economic illiteracy. I mean, I'm just going to repeat myself to say that's not how it works. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. Going on. It could effectively end the U.S.'s so-called exorbitant privilege. It could end it, Nima.
Oh, sorry.
It could.
I'm trying to find where you were reading right now.
Go up. No, stop.
Gotcha.
See the middle paragraph, the big
Yeah,
one
yeah.
at the end. Yep. So, yes, somehow some other country that doesn't issue dollars is going to end the privilege of the country that issues the dollars. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, continuing. But wait, you might ask yourself, what's the point of China having so many dollars? Don't they transfer the problem to themselves? They too need a place to invest all these dollars, don't they? I don't know, do they? You'd be right. The last thing China needs is more US dollars. In 2023, it ran a US dollar trade surplus of 823.2 billion. And for 2024, it's expected to be 940 billion. Like Nima just said, they're sitting on trillions of dollars, right? China is already absolutely awash with dollars. But that's where the beauty of the Belt and Road oh my God, this is just like going in so many different directions. But that's the beauty of where the Belt and Road Initiative comes in. Out of the 193 countries in the world, 152 of these countries are part of the Belt and Road Initiative. A very common characteristic of many of these countries is they owe debt in United States dollars to the U.S. government or other Western lenders. This is where China's strategy could become truly clever. China could use its US dollars to help Belt and Road countries pay off their dollar debts to Western lenders. But here's the key. In exchange for helping these countries clear their dollar debts, China could arrange to be repaid in yuan or in strategic resources or through other bilateral agreements. Okay, I think the example that I gave earlier of China of Russia selling oil for yuan, and then China not even like accepting it back, blows that out of the water, right? I mean, this. And does this even make sense? Okay, so China's going to use all these dollars to help other countries pay the country's debts and have them owe it back in yuan.
I mean, it's very speculative, all of this, but also Chinese government now has to have some department that's in charge of investing US dollars, and so they have to invest in solid businesses, maintain those businesses, or whatever they're going to do with the dollar. Uh, why? It's like, why do you want to get involved in the business of venture capitalism now and business of investment banking? I mean, you can do that, but it's going to distract you from whatever else. It's basically, I still don't quite get the point of all of
Right?
this.
Yeah. Like I said, he's just leapfrogging from one non sequitur to another here. But I mean, this is what in most economic circles this flies as something intelligent, right? Um, yeah. I mean, China doesn't respect its own currency, and they can't be trusted for anything. They'll gut you side. I mean, the Chinese mentality is we're number one, and it's okay for us to steal from everybody else because we're the best.
But also, some, this thing where he's saying China could use US dollars to help Belt and Road countries pay off their dollar debts. Okay, but it can already do that anyways with the dollar reserves that it has. What does that have to do with China issuing these
Exactly.
bonds? Now, if China were to issue these US dollar bonds and using them for debt forgiveness for bankrupt countries, then I don't see how these bonds are still paying for same rates as regular treasury bonds, because now suddenly they become very risky gambles where the money is just used to for debt relief for third world countries. So there's no return. There's probably some losses on that. uh, I don't. I mean, or you end up owning some bunch of junk bonds, or maybe that's the whole idea behind this exercise. I don't know. Mm-mm.
I'll keep reading. This would create a triple win for China. They get rid of their excess dollars because that's what they want to do, Nima. They want to get rid of their excess dollars. They help their partner countries escape dollar dependency, and they deepen these countries' economic integration with China instead of the U.S. Again, all these transactions happen within the central bank of the United States. If the U.S. decides they don't like any of these transactions happening, they can just go, nah, we
Yeah,
don't like that.
like
Yeah. For BRI countries, that's Belt and Road Initiative countries, this is attractive. Oh, he knows what's attractive to BRI countries, Nima. This is attractive because they can escape the trap of dollar denominated debt and threat of U.S. financial sanctions and get likely better conditions with China, which will help with their development. Oh, yeah. Yeah. China's going to give you a better deal. They're totally trustworthy, Nima. Like, I know that the U.S., the way it dominates the world and uses the dollar as a weapon is I'm not like subscribing that that's a good idea, but would you rather think that the U.S. would have your back better or China?
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break. In effect, this he's missing a word here. In effect, this would be China placing itself as an intermediary at the heart of the dollar system, where the dollars still eventually make their way back to the U.S. just through a path that builds Chinese rather than American influence and progressively undermines the U.S.'s ability to finance itself, and with all the consequences that this has on inflation. And again, this will not interfere with the United States' ability to finance itself at all. And so wait, the dollars still eventually make it back through the U.S. just through a path that builds Chinese rather than American influence. Again, they already have all these dollars, like you said. They have trillions and trillions of dollars. Why can't they do? Couldn't they have done this already with the dollars that they already have?
Yep. And maybe they do it. Maybe this is an idea that they might pursue. Whatever. I don't know, but it I don't see what it has to do with this particular bond issue.
Yes. Going on. At this stage, you probably tell yourself, come on, there's no way China can do that. The government surely has tools at its disposal to prevent this stuff, like I just mentioned. And the answer, surprisingly, is that there's actually little the US can do that doesn't undermine them in some shape or form. Like what? The most obvious response would be to threaten sanctions against the countries like Saudi Arabia or institutions that buy Chinese dollar bonds. But this would further demonstrate that dollar assets aren't actually safe from US political interference, further encouraging countries to diversify, compounding the problem. If this was true, then the United States sanctions countries all the time. They sanction countries all the freaking time, right? If this was true, then whatever problem he's describing would have already happened. Going on. The dollar's strength partly comes from network effects. Everyone uses it because everyone else uses it. No, everyone uses it because it gives you access to the strongest economy on the face of the planet. And the United States has a policy that gets enough dollars out into the system and honors them, unlike China with its own yuan, that there's enough liquidity to flow around and actually be used as an international currency. So the dollar strength partly comes from network effects. Everyone uses it because everyone else uses it. But as we've seen with Russia's sanctions, with the Russian sanctions, it creates. Hold on, this grammar's weird in here. But as we've seen with Russia, sanctions create a coordinating moment for countries to move away together, weakening these network effects. Well, I would really like an example of how the US dollar got weaker because of the sanctions on Russia, because as far as I've been able to tell, Russia's had nothing but problems due to the sanctions, and the US's dollar is stronger than ever. Like, Nima, do you remember when I think we did that with that like Neon Revolt tweet response, where there was this idea that the Russian ruble was going to get stronger and stronger and the U.S. weaker and weaker after the war started, and we've literally seen the opposite since then.
Yeah, and Russia was going on a gold standard supposedly too.
Yeah,
But
right.
thing.
We debunked that like we're doing this.
Well, I mean, Russia has, I think, been. I disagree with you, kind of. I think Russia has come back almost, I would say, stronger um, as a result of the sanctions, um, and has gained more independence, I guess you could say. But
I wasn't referring to like the internal economy. I was referring to like the value of the currency on the international stage.
yeah, I don't know what that is with Russia right now. I didn't, but yeah. So um, the dollar strength, right? So with the Russia sanctions created a coordinating one for countries to. So politically, yeah, it could happen. So he's saying that if there's going to be more sanctions, then the U.S. would isolate itself from the global economy.
Right, everybody would move away and start using other currencies,
Right,
supposedly.
and that's to some extent that's happening, I guess. But I don't really know if it's significant for the U.S. economy.
Right. Well, and then from what I understand from BRICS, because everyone's like, "Oh, BRICS is gonna," even Trump was like threatening BRICS. Yeah, BRICS is gonna make this new currency that is gonna move around the dollar. And from what I understand, every time BRICS meets, they just like look at each other and go, "Well, I'm not working with you," and then they leave. So when BRICS actually produces something useful,
Right.
I'll be
I mean,
interested.
yeah, it's a long shot, I think, because even China itself has a currency that is not a global reserve currency because it's too manipulated by the Chinese government. And until they can let that go, it can't really be. Not even the Chinese yuan can be a global currency. But how's the BRICS, mishmash, conglomerate currency supposed to work out at all? If not even the Chinese currency itself can be a global currency, given the
Right.
size and all scope of the Chinese economy. Maybe one day it will be, but that would require for the Chinese economy to, to become truly sustainably the largest economy and for the currency to be free floating.
which is highly unlikely given the fact that they're literally about to die out because of their lack
That's
of
the thing.
repopulation rates. Yeah,
They're now declining in population. So that's the big question. Where's that going to lead? So it doesn't seem to be conducive to economic growth.
yes. I'm going to keep going. Another option would be for the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates to make U.S. Treasuries more attractive. But this would be self defeating. It would increase the U.S. government's own borrowing costs at a time when they're already struggling with massive deficits, potentially triggering a recession. Now, I mean, if this is the first time you're listening to us, we have just gone over this ad nauseum. Um, Raising rates is inflationary, lowering rates is deflationary. The mainstream economists, they have it backwards.
But okay, so you're saying another option would be for the Fed to raise rates to make U.S. Treasuries more attractive, but that's not necessary. The U.S. government doesn't need to make U.S. Treasuries more attractive. It dictates the rates that it pays on the Treasuries that it issues, and it doesn't need your money. Basically, it's
Right.
giving you the option to earn some interest. So there's no need for the U.S. Treasury to compete to make their bonds more attractive. They set the rate, and the bonds follow. That's how it works.
Right. And then if there's this idea that okay, let's say the U.S. Treasury sets the rate at 4%, and China comes along and goes, we're going to set it at 8%, so everybody comes to us for to bring us all the money instead of going to the United States. Well, they're just setting themselves up for a Ponzi scheme,
Yeah.
right? I mean, at some point they won't be able to pay it back.
It's basically now
Yeah.
it's an investment scheme that you have to maintain somehow. So
Right.
I don't know.
All right. Uh, yeah. So and China getting similar rates as the US could simply match any rate increase. Yeah, I just addressed that. The US could also go for the nuclear option of restricting China's ability to clear dollar transactions, like I was just mentioning, but this would effectively immediately fragment the global financial system. Again, they've done this before and it didn't fragment the financial system, undermining the dollar's role as a global reserve currency, exactly what the US wants to avoid. And with China being the most important trading partner of the immense majority of the world's countries, nothing is less sure that the US would win at this game. No, I think the US would win, and again, and Trump apparently is planning on barking down that road anyway, but the again, China's literally on its way out. Like from an actual population standpoint. I just don't know what else to say other than like this whole thing of, China's economy is based on the government like massively subsidizing everything all the time within the country. Right. That's why you see these, skyscraper ghost cities and light rails that don't go anywhere and all this sort of stuff is because the government just like throws money at everything to be like, we need growth, we need growth, we need growth. But it's not real growth. So they're investing all this money to build things for nothing while at the same time, um, Nima, did you freeze up?
No, I'm just sharing something.
Oh, just sharing something else. Um, Let me get it up there. Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay. Nima's got a
So
projection chart for China's population.
this is China population projection. By 2050, population is expected to be about 1.2 billion. Currently, it's 1.4 billion. Okay. And it also says here long-term projections by 2100, China's population is projected to shrink to around 525 million, with a working age population of about 210 million. Population is expected to decline by around 900 million people between 2023 and 2100. So yeah, that's our main case against China, I guess. So maybe their idea is they're going to make their worker productivity so much more efficient with their AI and all that. I don't know, but that's the problem. The population shrinking that much. Um, we'll see. Well, it remains to be seen where that'll lead the country.
Can you pull the tweet back up?
Yeah. Okay, there it is.
Alrighty, add to scene. There it is. Boom. Okay. So,
In
yeah.
short, in
y-
short, this seems to be like some sort of Tai Chi, 4 ounces moving 1,000 pounds, moved by China, using minimal force to redirect the dollar's strength in a way that benefits China. We don't know that. Like I wrote at the beginning, however, at this stage, this is most likely just a message by China to the upcoming Trump administration. We can do this, so maybe think very carefully about all the nasty things you have in mind for us. The beauty of this move is how strategically elegant it is. It costs China almost nothing to demonstrate, but forces Washington to contemplate some very uncomfortable possibilities. It costs China quite a bit. It costs them all the bureaucracy to establish an investment company that now has to conduct profitable investments of U.S. dollars
in
given
order
to
to pay back the bonds.
them by investors that have the expectations that this money will come back as surely as it does with U.S. Treasury bonds. So,
Or they could just play Ponzi scheme,
so
right?
they're
And just
assuming they have to be assuming a zero default rate and very consistent flow of money. What are they going to do? They're maybe just going to turn around and invest it in U.S. Treasuries, and end up buying U.S. Treasuries uh, with that invested money.
actually, that would be hilarious, right? Actually, I wonder if they're actually doing that, Nima, because if they're offering 1 to 3 basis points more and they could turn around and buy treasuries with it, maybe they could afford to pay the tiny itty bitty bit of difference.
No, it makes no sense because they would. Oh yeah, right. So they'd have to subsidize their fund basically.
Right, but subsidize it to the point of 0.01 or 0.03%,
Right.
right?
So it's a sure money loser basically. Um this whole endeavor.
And I mean, I think this is a good opportunity now that we finish this tweet to again take a step back and recognize that we live in this world of total economic illiteracy. And while you don't while you're in that world, stuff like this sounds like it makes sense, but once you start getting a framework of how economy actually works, this sort of stuff turns into word salad nonsense. And if you haven't tuned into our show before, please go back and start watching through our shows on MMT and on economics, because you will find that what you thought was up is actually down. What you thought was down is actually up. Left is right and right is left. Um, Everything is totally backwards, and all like so many of these issues like this that people are like, "Oh my God, China's going to do whatever." The
Okay.
international
Yeah.
BRICS and the blah blah blah. You just can stop worrying about it.
We got some comments. Let's just look at those. The
Sure.
Chinese and Hong Kong central banks have about 10 times more dollar reserves than the IMF does. Yeah, I can believe that. Is it paper dollar like transport and plane? I don't know what that was regarding. If it's
Well,
not,
no,
it makes
he
more
was. I
sense.
can answer that. He was saying that unless they're transporting actual physical dollars, then then the transaction has to go through the Federal Reserve. In which
Yeah,
case, the U.S. government can go, well, maybe we want to stop it.
right. That's
Yeah.
what Werner says about the foreign exchange. Makes no sense, Saudi and China borrowings, except if it's paper money. Okay, so he's suggesting that maybe they are actually literally demanding paper dollars in order for you to buy those bonds. Um, Maybe I don't know. So anyway, yeah. So maybe they want to really have some cash down maybe for some black market operations, some drug dealings or weapons dealings. I don't know.
And then this is an interesting question. Andrew asks, "Does China have any true friends internationally?" My gut reaction is to say no. I mean, I think the history of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, is just rape everybody, backstab everybody, take what you can get, and never apologize. And I mean, just the mindset that I've heard this is what Chinese students are taught in school, which is essentially you are the best. You are the best. It is okay for you. It is great for you to take advantage of other people. It's okay for you to steal from other people, particularly if they're not Chinese, because you're the best. You're the best.
Yeah.
You're the best. So just this idea that, yeah, screw everybody else.
When they make an embargo on Iran, only the paper dollar circulated. So he's pointing out the importance, I guess, of the paper dollar. I mean, they could always do something like Tether if they wanted, says Andrew. Yeah, Tether or USDT or whatever other stable coins there are. I guess one of the problems with stable coins is now you are relying on a algorithm financial network that I don't know how much money you want to entrust in those dollars, but you are relying on some sort of um, novel systems. All I'm saying, and I'm a big crypto supporter, obviously, but I think it's amazing what they've done with the stable coins and all that. But a lot of them, they require liquidity to work without backing, and those who have backing, obviously, there's third party risk. So yeah. But certainly very good trade for trading. Certainly, if you want to buy or sell your coins and not have to go through the traditional banking system all the time, you trade them into stable coins and then you go back into crypto. Same with Lebanon.
This Colonel Foley guy at the beginning of the show, he
Hmm.
asked us, "Have you checked out the last book on Joseph Huber? Do you know who that is, Nima?"
I have not. No, I have not.
He says that um, it's an article on China borrowings by a libertarian. We should check it out.
Okay. I think we've had enough
I
of
like
China
that.
borrowings. If there's other things that we
Yeah,
want to um, discuss, we can do
he
that.
said well on this thing that he mentioned, he said an MMT lens is needed there. But yes, the what was I saying right at the beginning? I was mentioning China, and then I said we might get on to some other points, but no, just in general. I mean, I just maybe some MMT talk. The
What else is on our Trello board?
the Catholic economic points.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably
I don't think I got time right now
Mhm.
to get into
Right.
the full 10 points there. A little late in the day for
For
me.
sure, for sure. Well, I mean, Bitcoin is doing great, and crypto is doing great. That's I don't know if that's
That's
something.
great.
That's great.
That's
Oh,
great. Well, actually, let's talk about that. So Dan Pena, my mentor, right?
mhm.
I saw him finally release a video saying that Bitcoin was created by Putin to destabilize the United States dollar. Let's just assume that's true for a second and dissect it from there. Like okay, Putin slash Russia comes up with this idea. How can we undermine the United States dollar? Let's create this thing called Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know Whitney
How
Webb.
would that undermine the dollar? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
How they would sorry, I was just reading Colonel Foley's comments. Also, you should check Whitney Webb. I've heard of Whitney Webb. Anyway, yes. What were you were saying?
So let's say it's true that Putin slash Russia
Okay.
created Bitcoin
Yeah.
in order to destabilize. How would that destabilize the dollar?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, well, I mean, it's an, like a competing currency system, so people don't use the dollar anymore, but yet they still do use the dollar. Um, but it's a very roundabout, complicated, highly sophisticated thing to develop for some Russian hacker, um, and it was very organic the way it was launched, and very it wasn't without bumps and challenges. So the whole government created it with some kind of big plan in mind. I don't think that's a plausible theory, in my opinion.
I don't think so either. And I mean, I just wanted to put it on the table because when you like, I could understand if you take on the traditional mindset of like, okay, the government has to borrow and to tax in order to afford this sort of stuff. Um, Actually, I don't even understand how Bitcoin would screw it up that way. I mean, the one thing I can think of is maybe Bitcoin can be used to be gotten around sanctions,
Right.
right? Which is, I mean, people do that inside the United States. People who get canceled. I mean, look at
Well, I
Andrew
mean,
Torba, for example.
Bitcoin is a challenge to the entire power structure on every level, to the entire corporate structure on every level, right? So it's not just this banking dollar challenge, but it's much deeper. I think it's a whole new way of doing currency, right? So,
Right.
uh, but then is as long as they're taxing governments, their currencies are still going to be relevant.
Exactly. That's the point.
So
What I want to get at, right?
that's
If
what we're
you
saying.
still have to
That's
pay
what we're
your
saying.
taxes in dollars, I still need dollars.
Yeah, yeah. So ultimately, that will probably go away when we get to the network state, which should be another card that's on there. But
Oh,
obviously,
let's add it.
obviously, we have not. No, no, you added that card, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Um, the network state, yeah, but that's the bigger discussion too. But this whole idea that the governance of the future is going to be different, that it's going to be different, that it's going to be network based rather than nation based, and that's why I call it what he refers
Right.
to as network state.
Which obviously Bitcoin would be an example of that, right? It doesn't
Yes,
matter where you're located
yes.
in order to get it to work.
Bitcoin is a network, but it's not yet a network state. He lays out very specific requirements for something to be a network state, and it's fascinating. But we'll get to it some other show, not this one.
Colonel Foley, can you write out full paragraphs or sentences instead of these little clips? Because I'm having a hard time following what you're talking about. Okay, he says Bitcoin is going to be dollarized and imposed on South America as controlled by the U.S. What does that mean? Bitcoin is
Imposed
going to be
Bitcoin
dollarized.
is going to be dollarized and imposed on Southern.
I mean,
So
I know in El Salvador that El Presidente Bukele is what did he say?
okay,
Will
I
collect taxes.
just want to say something about all these things that are happening that people are doing with cryptocurrency right now, such as El Salvador buying Bitcoin, such as the U.S. talking about strategic Bitcoin reserve, such as Michael Saylor accumulating giant sums of Bitcoins. It's for somebody like Michael Saylor, okay, would already say this is a pretty crazy strategy what you're doing. It can go phenomenally well. It can also go terribly wrong, I think, because ultimately you're borrowing pretty large amounts of money at arguably favorable rates um, to buy substantial amounts of the Bitcoin supply up. So there can be huge value in that, obviously, and that MicroStrategy is now the largest holder of Bitcoins. But you expose yourself to high fluctuations. Now, if Bitcoin goes up another 10x or so, then this will be not necessarily a problem. But if it goes through times where they're down on their from their average buy-in price and all that, then that'll hurt them. And now, okay, this is corporate MicroStrategy. Okay, it's already crazy, but for governments to be doing this is you know also is very speculative behavior for a government to buy large amounts of bitcoins. Now, if it's for strategic reasons, um, just like you do weapons purchases, you set aside some bitcoins in case you get ransomware, so you can have a protection against ransomware attacks. That I can understand. It's a defensive tool. But to buy it up to help your country with financial problems is a huge gamble. That's not really the job of the government of a country to do. It's something, if anything, you do on your own. But to solve a country's financial problems with it, I mean, it's risky. It's playing with
Yeah,
fire.
well, and I think it ignores that again. The leaders not recognizing that they're in control of their own currency. I mean, when we did our Argentina show last time, we went over this, but it just popped into my head right now. I read an article a couple weeks ago that, again, going back to El Salvador, that Bukele was looking to sign on for a loan from the IMF. And what does the IMF do? Demand austerity,
Yeah,
right? we'll give you this loan, but you must cripple your country in order to do it. And it's just like, can I just get in front of Bukele and be like, dude, you can control your own currency. I mean, I know El Salvador's tiny, and I don't know what they have to offer in
Well,
terms of their country, but still,
yeah, so
you can
it's like
control your own currency.
build your economy first instead of speculating with bitcoins. I mean, it's I don't see it helping the people. Actually, a lot of people, from what I heard, they don't like it. They don't even accept it, even though they have to
Yes, I've read
by
that too.
law, right?
Yeah.
But they're like, no, I'm not into it, bro. So they should probably work on just building a free and prosperous economy, and then they can worry about things like um, building up a Bitcoin reserve. Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that maybe they'll get super lucky, right? Since Bitcoin now goes up phenomenally from here, which some people expect, then the gamble went well, okay?
Right.
But you still gamble, you know.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's a great trader when prices are going up. Right.
And so this is
Yeah.
why I'm like what I'm talking about now are sort of I'm seeing the signs of the reasons for the next big Bitcoin crash. They're all, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying that the crash can happen right now. It's probably normally statistical would be end of next year sometime, but we are seeing all these leverage mechanisms building up. MicroStrategy issuing bonds to buy bitcoins, right? So going in debt to buy a bitcoin. So credit
Individuals taking
funded,
out mortgages so they
yeah,
can go buy Bitcoin. Yeah.
credit funded, a private credit funded boom to some extent. At least it's beginning. And so then now if the price goes up even more, then it'll have a compounding effect of more people getting interested, more people borrowing more based on higher valuations. That's the recipe for the next big Bitcoin crash, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's the uh, what was it? Tulip bulbs from the Netherlands in like the 1600s. They had a crazy tulip uh, crash.
Yeah.
Like everybody went insane on tulips and it crashed. I mean, and what another perfect example of how the private sector gets high on itself. It falls in love
Yeah.
with whatever it's doing and then destroys
Well,
itself.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
Minsky cycle, right? You start with in the hedge phase. Did he call it hedge? Yes, you start hedge, you become speculative, and you advance into Ponzi. It's always like that. You start with all your future obligations being covered by your income, and then you go into speculative, where only a portion of your future is covered. And then you go into Ponzi, where you need to borrow more to support your outflows, and then it all comes crashing down.
So our goal is to sell right before that happens and buy everything up after it happens. All right,
Yeah,
Nima.
buy when there's blood on the streets. Yeah, like said.
Well, good. Hey, Nima, I've got to head home and take care of my kids. We're all sick at my house right now, including my baby.
Oh, sorry to hear. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, you can hear it in my voice, but everyone's just kind of like bleh, snot. Bleh. So, everyone, please like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow this channel. I think we cover a lot of good stuff. We're covering ideas that you're not hearing anywhere else. Economic ideas, historical ideas, systematic politics ideas you're not hearing anywhere
Yeah,
else.
I just want to give a shout out to Colonel Foley for your comments. Thank you very much. And also the final comment: Main Street is hyping up Bitcoin while Wall Street is buying all the agricultural land they can in the US. Maybe there's
Good
some
point.
truth to that. You
Yeah.
know, people are so busy with like digital asset speculation and in the real world behind their backs. You got to get some land, you got to get some property, you got to make sure you're independent in case people try to control your food supply, etc. So yeah, good point.
Good. Well, this has been Dylan Moore and Nima Major of Irida TV, which you can find at irida.tv or on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute. Did I miss one? Just
YouTube,
search
Rumble.
Irida TV,
Yeah,
IRIDA.
I mean, I guess Gap TV, is it still happening, or I don't know.
No, no,
Maybe.
that ended.
Okay.
They threw that one out. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks, Nima. We'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.